Where to invest is an increasingly interesting question these days. Private equity investors are looking seriously at Africa. Why? Well, we have one with us today. He's Ibrahim Sagna. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
A founding partner of Blackthorne Capital, just begun at the beginning of this year. And you're here on campus to talk to the students as part of Africa Week, so welcome. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the honor.
I've got to start by asking you, what kinds of investment opportunities are there in Africa? What are you interested in?
As an institution, we do focus on scalable operation, and we think that sectors such as telecom, oil, and infrastructure, in a modern way of looking at it, infrastructure, service plays in telecom, in also oil service companies, if you view those as infrastructure, stand to provide outstanding return for investors. And that is true also for real estate. If you consider that in some parts of Africa, you get a hotel costing you more than a stay in London per day. So we believe that a very well-orchestrated operation tackling a series of sectors could help investors get superior returns.
You know, the other thing that's interesting too is we hear a lot about sort of micro investments in developing countries, and because I get the sense that yes, these big, obviously there's a need for infrastructure for hotels and things like that, but you're also involved in Messine investment, and that's when I looked it up on the website, it was six little micro investment opportunities. What are they exactly?
Well, Messine is a private equity company created probably in the early part of 2000 and been backed by most of the developmental agencies of the West, so the IFC, FMO, the DEGs of the world, and basically it was a mission of financing microfinance institution. In terms of an asset class, it services rural population, so the bottom of the pyramid really, but it has proven itself to be a very sustainable economic model within the family of financial services because of the fact that you are really, in the end, using development money to allow an individual to run a business. So you really kind of have micro-entrepreneurs. And in this specific case, you are not providing capital to an individual to basically consume. So it's not a simple consumer play. You're actually empowering someone to run a business. So that creates, a stickiness that you don't get in many other financial product offering because that person owes you the creation of his company. And if he stops paying, he stops seeing income. So for that reason, he pays well. And that segment of financial services commands the highest payout ratios. I mean, people default. The default rates are around 2% globally.
Wow, that's very little. But as you say, it's fundamental to this person's well-being and his. Now, what kind of projects have you been funding with this? Or I assume you're still funding.
Well, Messine is a company in which I'm on the board. Historically, the firm has actually financed and backed one of the landmark microfinance institution in Africa, in East Africa, called Equity Bank, which started as a micro-lending institution previously owned by the government, taken back by investors and basically turned efficient. And today is probably one of the leading financial institution in the East African corridor. Just to give you a perspective of taking a company that was not functioning, was following outmoded processes taken by private equity hands and basically engineered to become a better performing asset for first rural population, but over time by deploying the right formulas of the technology, financial expertise, and management processes, you got effectively the second or third best bank in the region.
Sounds like it was a dress rehearsal for Blackthorne Capital, actually. I mean, was it? What made you decide to go into the bigger investments?
Well, historically, I've been involved in private equity in Africa with large institutions since 1999. I was within the first team of private equity practitioners that put together a firm called Emerging Market Partnership Africa. It was actually the group that focused into Africa for a larger fund, firm called EMP. So EMP managed $6 billion and had basically erected this fund focused on Africa. We were able to raise in 1999 about $403 million and deploy that over 5 years, over more than 15 companies. And a lot of those deals were quite sizable deals, typically Pan-African, over $20 million ticket. And those, on average, did very well. One of those transactions was Celtel of Mo Ibrahim, which was a company in which we invested in the second quarter of 2000, and when they had 50,000 subscribers. And by the time we exited 5 years later, it had north of 4 million.
And these are largely indigenous companies, too. We're not talking about foreigners who come into...
the majority of the staff was African, telecom, and what came out of it, investors got between 4 to 8 times their money. So I really subscribe to the view of scale, and I believe that scale allows you to really mitigate your risk. It basically, if you combine it with a growth story, you sustain a chance of really providing a very risk-adjusted value proposition for an investor.
What else can investors expect, though, with Africa? Clearly there's a big return, there's a big potential for growth, and I would imagine there's a big potential for risk. So, what kind of investor invests here, and what's the ride like?
Well, the ride can be bumpy, but I think that is part of the private equity practice. It's one of ascertaining risk and basically making the right judgment calls. That's why investors really empower us with capital and give us the job of selecting companies. So out of 10 investments, you'll usually get 6 that were not necessarily good ideas, either for intrinsic reasons, that you hired the wrong team, your investment thesis was not right, the timing of your investment was incorrect, either because you paid too much or because currently there is a recession and you don't have exit possibilities. And those are external reasons that you cannot control.
And internal, you can't always control those either.
You cannot control that all the time. So I think the combination of those make investing in private equity quite a risky proposition. But Africa in itself is an improving story. It's a story that I have been watching since the late 90s.
And you yourself are from Senegal.
And I myself, I'm from Senegal, and clearly you can tell that the value proposition has transformed to become something quite phenomenal. And it's piggybacking on another story, which is the emerging market explosion.
So how much private equity do you reckon has gone into Africa? You've been there in 10 years. You must have seen big changes. Tell me, it must be escalating at a faster pace.
At a much faster pace. It's dramatic. I think back in '99, when I was with CMP, the Africa Fund was $400 million. It was clearly the largest one focusing in Africa in a Pan-African way, excluding South Africa, which is in itself a quite different market because it's quite advanced economy. The same is true with some Northern African countries. But on a continental level, 400 million and change was a whole lot of money. Nowadays, at that level, you have one fund out of North Africa that has about $8 billion under management. EMP has basically now the Africa team called ECP. They manage about over $1 billion. And you have other firms out of London that are basically doing transaction on average at $100 million. So clearly, the transactions that are being done are much bigger. The capital available is coming from different sources. Before, you only had DFIs, which are development financial institutions, attending to over 90% of the limited partners. Nowadays, you have the sovereign wealth funds, you have the family offices, you have hedge funds, which obviously got very big over the past many years and did get into that race. So clearly, it's a good problem for Africa, because you have that competing with the Indian, the Chinese, and other emerging market source of capital.
Let me end by asking you, what do you think all this investment is going to mean for Africa? I mean, the more people work, the less they suffer, the less they fight. So how do you envision Africa changing maybe in the next decade as a result of all this?
Well, I am a bullish optimist about Africa. It's a continent that I have in my DNA. I've observed it grow. I've seen it become a better student of the global economy in terms of improving its fiscal program, macroeconomic policies, and it's no longer this story of AIDS, this story of corruption, this story of governments just like being pure dictatorship or wars. Early 90s, there was over 20 countries, civil wars. Now you probably hear 3 or 4. Tomorrow, with private equity coming in and people observing the need to really sustain stability in this economy, creates an alignment of interest from the external source of capital, be it private investors like ourselves, sovereigns, or others. People that are in those locations, which are the population, which aspire to better quality of life, service, and consumer goods to be provided to them at par with what they've known overseas. And the governments themselves today want to be competitive. You have countries like Mauritius, Botswana, Rwanda, which exemplify that push up front the value of corporate governance and showing that international investors can come in and feel safe. So I think this cohesive behavior from all stakeholders is going to permit Africa to really be a completely different value proposition for the next class of investors coming. I mean, you observing really what you had in Asia 10 to 15 years ago, that India and the tigers, and it's gonna materialize in a phenomenal way. You probably still have the youngest population in the globe, over 1 billion people.
It sounds like Africa's time is coming. Thank you very much, Ibrahim Sagna of Blackthorne Capital, for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
My pleasure.